So it's that 30 seconds that I like to focus on to find out what really happened to those 3 buildings that came down that day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that is it. 30 seconds of silence. We are releasing this film tomorrow right on our Vimeo channel. We have a Vimeo channel now, and the great thing about it is that you can watch it instantly. So spread the link around once we send it out tomorrow, and tell other people to watch it. I mean, tell other people to just watch. You see how short it was? It was like a half hour long. And did you catch that gulp from Cheyenne Sunder in that one clip? That says it all for me. So we're going to move on to the next segment of our event tonight, and we're going to be interviewing the guy who made this film. He should be very well known to this audience already. His name is Dylan Avery. He is a director and producer, and he's responsible for several well-known 9/11 truth documentaries, as well as others that cover a wide array of different subjects. He is the guy behind the 9/11 themed film Seven, The Unspeakable, and of course, Loose Change. His other works include titles such as Buzzkill, Is There Life After Coffee, Olson, A Field Full of Secrets, Black and Blue, Innocently Violent, Mile Marker, Magic Molecule, The Professional, A Stevie Blatt Story, Trust Me, 4'11", and Asteroid. So he's very prolific and covers a wide array of different things. His latest film, of course, is the one that you just watched, 30 Seconds of Silence. Let's go ahead and bring Dylan in here from the back of the studio, if I can find him. There he is. Dylan, welcome to the program.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's make it bigger here so we're larger than life. So it's been about a year since we talked last, and we were eagerly anticipating this film. And I think it's been worth the wait. A lot of information packed into that, something that is very serious, very, as the description says, very haunting. And I know that 9/11 is not your only subject that you're interested in. I know that you focus on other things. You're not a one-dimensional guy. So just start off by telling us, what is it like for you when you revisit this topic, something that you started down this path of back when you were in college, and coming back into it now later on in life?
Well, I guess going back to the previous productions and films you had mentioned, Seven, like for example, when Kelly first approached me about Seven, she's like, hey, we've got this new study about Building 7. There's a lot of groundbreaking discoveries, and we'd really like to make a documentary about it. And for me, that was the appeal of that project, because again, it's a new take on something that I thought I was basically done with, which for all intents and purposes I am. But Seven was a unique approach. It gave me the ability to hire Ryan, hire Scotty, fly to Alaska, shoot some interviews, actually direct something, which, is always an easy way to get me to sign on to something when I only have to direct it. But I got to work with you guys. I got to work with Kelly, Brian, Scotty. We had a great time in Alaska, a great time with Professor Halsey. Took a longer than any of us anticipated to put that together, but then we did put it out. It was a great hit. I don't want to say hit, but I mean, people really enjoyed it. And then Unspeakable, I had no, and forgive me if I'm going backwards too much, but I mean, you asked for the why. So, yeah, I mean, Unspeakable, again, I wasn't even planning on doing anything for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I was planning on turning my phone off and ignoring all the interview requests, which I still did, which felt really nice. But, as Kelly came to me and she was like, we're kind of in a pinch and we need someone to kind of pick up this project and carry it through the finish line. So we had 3 months to figure out and make and shoot and edit a film. But I think it was kind of that the seat of your pants kind of exploratory nature of it, which is why it worked so well, because I had a pre-existing set of interviews that had to be shot, and we were going to kind of figure it out from there. But after that first sit down with Bob, McIlvaine, I was like, all right, cool. This is not cool, but this is an angle. This is something that I can focus on, that the film can focus on, that I don't feel has really been discussed. And of course, it was the 20th anniversary. It was a nice opportunity to kind of showcase what kind of movies I'm making these days, for anybody that cares. But it's just because somebody had emailed me about Unspeakable recently, and they're like, hey, it's like, it was really good to see that and to see your kind of growth as a filmmaker and a storyteller, and it was nice to see like your growth. And I thought it was cool too. I thought it was a really unique angle, and I thought it was an important thing that needed to be done and needed to be said. Matt Campbell and his whole inquiry, with the British legal system, like, I felt that was like the main story angle that needed to be covered, because again, it's real, it's happening right now. So, between documenting Bob's 20-year struggle at that point, Matt and his family, Drew, there's a lot of things that Drew De Palma said that still stick with me to this day about his mom and kind of like where she was at in her life, and she was finally starting to put her life together, and then 9/11 happened, and it just sucks. Like, there's so many people like that were turning their lives around and were starting to do really well, and we'll never know where they were going to wind up. So I think it's a combination of finding a new approach and finding a new thing to focus on, and not just kind of rehashing the same thing, because I would never want to just make another movie that's talking about the same things that I talked about 16, 17 years ago at this point. It's only the appeal of having a new angle, being able to actually go out and shoot something, conduct interviews, do it properly, shoot it, edit it professionally, and make like an actual film. And I think that the YouTube traffic speaks for itself on that one. I think Unspeakable broke 1 million like a while ago, and I still get the occasional email about it. So it's great. I mean, like, it's something that still matters to me. It's still important to me, and I'm never going to turn my back on it. I'm never going to be like, oh, well, whatever, that was me in the past and this is me now. And I mean, like, obviously that is true, because like, I'm not who I was when I made Loose Change, but it's still very important to me. And there's people like Bob, and there's people like the Campbells and the De Palmas, and like Frank DiMartini, and like Bill Bernier. Like, there's so many people that are just still suffering because of this thing that happened 20 years ago. So it's never not going to be valid for me, if any of that makes sense.
Well, once you wake up to this issue, it changes you forever. It changes how you look at the world, how you watch the news, how you think about every possible thing that comes up. And it leaves an imprint on you that you will carry to the day you die. I know that's true about me. And, I wanted to you kind of touched on this when all the stuff you were talking about just now, but talk about the challenge of repackaging this issue. Like, I know for us here, the evidence is the evidence. I mean, how often can you talk about free fall of acceleration of Building 7 and make it something new and repackage it for a new audience and all of this, because it just kind of stays the same. Sometimes new evidence gets added, but again, we made this case 10 years ago. We're up against a big brick wall from the system trying to get action on it. But, it should be that we just say it once and it goes forward, but we got to keep on reinventing new ways to get it out, new documentaries, new methods of getting the information out there. So for you as a filmmaker, having done this a couple of times, describe the process of trying to find a new angle and a new way to cover the same subject.
Well, jumping to this one, after speaking about the last two, one of the appeals was focusing on John Cole, because like, I had heard about him and a little bit of his videos, but I was not like familiar with his research and the work he had done. Originally this project was going to focus more on Tony and his Missing Jolt paper, but there wasn't like a deep dive that could be done there, and like Tony was kind of dealing with a lot of stuff at that time too, so we kind of like pivoted over and kind of like focused more on John, because he had his experiments, we had more time to shoot with him, and it was just kind of a new thing. It was a new thing to bring to people's attention. So that was kind of the appeal of this one. And also, I can't even remember like what the genesis of it was, but I just knew like early on that I wanted to get into an abandoned building. Like, I just wanted like weathered steel beams and iron, and like, I've always loved abandoned buildings, so I'm sure there was like an actual reason for this. But and that was a struggle. Like, I mean, we were like a week or two out from shooting. Like, plane tickets had been bought and like everyone was coming out, and like I'm going back and forth with Ryan, the DP. I'm like, dude, I can't find the right building. Like, there's this thing on Pure Space and there's this thing, and like, I don't know what's the right place is. And then he sent me a link to the Flexible Flyer building, and I was like, that's perfect. So, Kelly did her amazing producing thing and emailed them and got it all set up. And then, again, that's the great thing about hiring someone like Ryan. I can talk to him about the project, and it's just like, all right, well, this is why I want to do this, and this is why I'd like to shoot here. And so the first day we were at the factory, Ryan did like a couple B-roll passes, but then the guy who owned the place was like super cool, because I texted him. I was like, yo, dude, we had like such a long day, or maybe probably Kelly texted him. But just like, yo, we had like such a long day of shooting, and there's just like shots we wanted to get. Like, is there any way we can get back in here tomorrow morning? And he's like, yeah, I mean, the construction crews will be here tomorrow, but I mean, just come on in and let yourself in. So like I went in, like I went to the roof and flew my drone for a bit. Ryan just went like up to the third, fourth floor and then back down and like got all those beautiful nature shots. And then it like, even when I was seeing Ryan doing that and some of the shots he was getting, I was like, all right, I need to ask John about nature, because I know that I want to use all this beautiful footage that Ryan just shot. So I got to ask John about nature. And I did. And he gave me that beautiful little spiel, which opens the entire thing. So, like going back to what you said, it's like we can't just rehash the same information and the same points and the same things over and over again. You have to make something that's intriguing, mysterious in some way. You got to kind of catch people off guard with the first minute or two. It's like, all right, well, I thought I knew what this was going to be, but now I'm not so sure. So, no, I'm pretty happy with how it came out, all things considered.
Right, and I love the opening to that. I love the sentiments expressed by John. In the end, nature always wins. It's like that poem Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley, where you have the statue, the monument to this ancient emperor, and talking about it, look upon my works, ye mighty, and tremble, and yet it's just sitting there, weathered, broken, and time just marches on without us. I think that is absolutely true. But we got to leave our impact and our imprint here during our time on this planet. Now, I just want to remind our audience that we are taking your questions. If you didn't catch me saying that in the beginning, best way to submit them is to go to 911freefall.com to this post here. You guys sent to your inbox, and there's a question form. You can just enter it in, just put your first name or any first name in there, or you can write to us, screening@ae911truth.org. And I got our first question here. This is an interesting one. I'm sure you've been asked this before. Have you ever been threatened because of your movies?
No, I have not. I wish I had a longer or more intriguing answer to that, but no, not really. And I mean, like, even back then at the time, like 2005, 2006, when people would ask me that question, the go-to answer was always like, well, I mean, the easiest way to prove that I'm like right about any of this and that I'm onto something would be to threaten me, and so that would be probably the worst thing that they could do. So no, never been threatened.
Right, and they don't operate by threatening people. They do other things.
Yeah, it's by proxy,
Exactly. So it's interesting. Someday maybe I'll write a book about it. So I'm just curious too, because it's a short film, and there's advantages that I see in putting out a short film. Do you think that the short length of this film will cause it to be reached by more people, especially in our short attention span lifestyle that we have? If something is more than 5 minutes on YouTube, people will pass it up. But do you think that could be a contributing factor into getting it out to more people?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like, especially considering the last thing was Unspeakable, an hour and 45 minute full feature documentary. It's nice to just kind of like scale it back and to not try and reinvent the wheel and not try to make like another like compelling full length feature film, because we just weren't going to be able to do that with this one. So yeah, I think the short runtime will help. Yeah, I mean, it's different. It's short. It's punchy. It makes its point. It has an interesting opening. So yeah, I think it's got a shot.
Now, I got a good question that came in here. It says, where does the film's title come from?
That comes from John's kind of central thesis that the 30 seconds of World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7 collapsing on 9/11 is kind of I'm trying to remember how he said it in the thing that I just watched. But yeah, it's those 30 seconds. It's like you don't even need to have sound. You don't even need to. I mean, you would be hearing like people screaming and things like that. But it was also the 30 seconds that, like you said, the mainstream media kind of started to ignore and like broadcast less and less as the the look backs and the anniversaries continued. So it's the 30 seconds of silence from the majority of the mainstream coverage of 9/11 and the building collapses that day. I hope that explains it.
It's interesting because I've watched these buildings collapse so many times, working here at 9/11 Truth, and people will ask me like, "What did you think when you actually first watched the towers come down?" And I don't even remember what I was thinking. It was just sort of like this weird, surreal moment. Describe for our audience your 9/11 experience when you watched those towers come down.
Oh, we're really going to do this, huh? We're going to go back 21 and a half years.
I got other questions about loose change, so yeah.
No, I mean, I don't, like, the thing is, like, I think I was actually between my house and high school when the buildings collapsed, so I didn't see it live when it happened. I saw it after the fact, where they were kind of replayed. But I mean, like, the whole day was just like such a blur, especially for me, 18 and like just going to high school, and like started the day with my friend Sandy at my house because I was only taking like one class during the day. So we were just sitting in my house waiting to go into class, and then she started getting texts from her phone from her mom. It's just like, turn on the TV, what channel? It doesn't matter, any channel. But as far as I remember, I didn't actually see them collapse live that day. Like I said, because my class would have started at like 10:30, 10:45. So between those times, I would have been on my way up to the school. So I would have only seen it after the fact, and especially 7, obviously.
Right. A lot of people didn't even know Building 7 collapsed until much like years later. Later. We got a question in here. Somebody's interested in the filming aspect. It says, how much does it cost to make movies like this, and what kind of cameras do you use?
This was shot on the Sony FX9, which is the same camera we shot The Unspeakable with. And we actually, because we had a much smaller budget on this one, just because the scope of the project was smaller and there wasn't the big 20th anniversary push for fundraising, so we actually used the in-house FX9 that we used for Unspeakable, and then a lot of those like floaty shots, like the really slow cinematic movements, that's all with this really cool camera that had just come out at the time called the DJI Ronin. We had one at our production office, and I was like, because I had to make a choice. I was like, all right, we need to save money on camera rentals and equipment and all that stuff. We need to do this as like buttoned up as possible. So we already had the in-house FX9, then we rented the Ronin and some glass, and this was actually, I think this was our cheapest production, because like 7, yeah, I don't want to like just like throw numbers out into the ether, but like 7 and then Unspeakable, which was a lot more than 7. But this one, 30 Seconds of Silence, was actually cheaper than 7, and a much actually, I guess the production time was about the same, because we had like 3 to 5 days in Fairbanks and then 2 days in Philly with some pickup stuff. But no, I mean, it's, like cost, like, I mean, if you're trying to rent like the nicest camera and the nicest glass and the nicest equipment, I mean, yeah, you're looking at like 4 or 5 figures, especially once you start bringing in lighting trucks and grip and electric, which is, the kind of stuff that Ryan prefers, because that's where he gets beautiful shots like the one you saw in here. But I mean, like, if the question is just like, how much does it take to make a movie? The answer is 0. I mean, find a camera and just go make it. That may sound like a bit of a throwaway answer, but I mean, that's the truth. I mean, filmmakers are going to make films. They're not going to be stopped by monetary limits or really any limits. They're just going to make movies, and a filmmaker is a filmmaker. I'm just lucky that I'm now at this point where I get to work with budgets, and I get to hire a DP and a sound man, and I get to actually direct, as opposed to having to do everything myself, which is what I was doing for many, many years. And that is a rite of passage. I mean, like, I don't think anybody should just be like handed a large budget and just like, all right, cool, go direct, because like you're just not going to have that perspective. Like, I've done everything on set. Like, I've PA'd, I've run sound, I've run camera, like I've helped with catering, like I've done it all. So like when I'm directing, like I already know what all those roles need, and I already know what people's needs are, and I know how to talk to actors, and like I already know all these things because I've already kind of been there. I'm not just like showing up as a director. It's like, all right, cool, you guys over there do what I want you to do, and you guys over there do what I want you to do, and then I just kind of like sit back. It's like I'm usually helping Ryan like carry gear inside when we're on a shoot. It's like there's no like, I may be the director, but I'm not above like helping us load in and load out. Like we're all a team. So yeah, I mean, you don't need money to make movies, but it helps.
Right. Well, the best leaders go out and fight with the army too. They don't just sit on a throne back at the castle. All
Yep.
right, I got a question in here. You ready for another loose change question?
Oh, sure, why not?
All right. Wasn't Mark Cuban going to release Loose Change in the movie theaters years ago?
He was. That's some. That's a bit of a deep cut at this point because it seems like whenever I bring that up to people, they don't know. Yeah, after second edition went viral, and Hollywood started knocking, and producers from Hollywood hit us up, and Charlie Sheen was talking to us. Um, yeah, that was the plan. Mark Cuban, Magnolia Pictures, Charlie Sheen was going to narrate it. It was going to be a whole thing, but like Two and a Half Men was up for syndication, and Mark Cuban was already getting threats, and people were just like, "I'm never going to go to a Mavericks game again if you release this Loose Change movie." So that was going to happen. That was going to be the third edition, and so that didn't happen. But then we made a bunch of promises and hired a bunch of people to make this amazing third edition that was going to be seen by the world, and then we still had to kind of pick up the pieces and release something anyway. So yeah, that's a fun time.
I think they would have gone and seen another Mavericks game. People always come back when it's sports. But okay, so they asked about Loose Change. They opened the floodgates for me. I'm curious about this. You made this film back in your college days, and you
Never
hit
went
the
to
nail
college.
on the head.
Never went to college.
Oh, okay, because I always heard on whenever they covered you with the hit pieces, they said it was a bunch of college kids.
Well,
and talking about. And
I think
all
that
this stuff.
I think that what might have started that is our first interview that went viral, which is what kind of like kicked off the media snowball. We were at our local college at a Cindy Sheehan event. And Burmis had gone to college there at Suco, but Corey and I hadn't. Well, Corey later on down the road did go to college, but at the time Burmis was ex-college and me and Corey were not college, but we were at the state college when Cindy Sheehan was speaking, which is when WICZ interviewed us, which is when they put out the 3-part piece, which is when that went viral all across the world and back and crashed their servers, and that's when the snowball started. But I'm sorry, it's just like it's just funny. People say, "Oh, a bunch of college students made it." It's like, technically, no.
No college. All right. But you were at that age and everything. And I think a lot of people, especially aspiring filmmakers, would be ecstatic to have some work that they made when they were really young, continuing to be associated with them and things. Now you're older, and a lot of times you were just mentioning earlier about how, you still get interview requests and things like that about Loose Change whenever the anniversary comes around. What is it like for you to have this stick with you throughout your life and continue to be asked about something that you made when you were a completely different person?
Well, that's kind of the funny thing, because I sit here doing this interview and doing this broadcast about this new 9/11 thing, but like Loose Change and 9/11, like actually at this point does feel like a completely different life. Like it just, I have so many different things going on now. Like Corey and I have Otsego Media. Like we wrote and shot Asteroid together, and that led to us making more feature films, and now we're bringing even more feature films to New York. And like there's so many things like constantly going on, and like so many things I'm working on, that like there are like nice chunks of time where like I'm just not thinking about Loose Change, and I'm not thinking about 9/11, and I'm not thinking about all this stuff like it used to just hang over my head nonstop. So it was rough. It was definitely rough, especially being like thrust into the limelight like that, especially when that wasn't the goal. Like I thought I was going to make this silly little movie and it might have like a little bit of a following on the internet. I'd make my 1,000 DVDs and that would be that. But we all know it didn't quite turn out that way. But yeah, I don't know. It was rough. It was rough, especially like the years after, and when I was just like, well, what do I do now? Like I'm doomed now. Like this is just me. This is just who I am for the rest of my life, no matter what I do or say. And so there was some struggle, and there was some moving to LA and getting on sets and getting the film experience and just kind of like having to do the grind. But now I'm back home in upstate New York doing what I love, and like I said, I don't really think about this stuff nearly as often as I did, but I'm still happy to revisit it and talk about it. So I feel like I've maybe somewhat accomplished a happy medium between the two, maybe.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about or you read history, and they talk about famous books that somehow changed how people thought, like The Jungle, or what's the other one? Uncle Tom's Cabin. Those are the two that come to my mind immediately. And we entered this new digital era where it's now internet documentaries. And I can remember that before the internet was all censored and we have sort of a dead internet now. I mean, this thing would get passed around. You'd see it on the front page of YouTube. I think this is before Google bought it. And everybody had heard of it. And they call it the first internet blockbuster. Even David Lynch commented on it. So
David Lynch, Kevin Smith, like it was crazy. It was crazy. And like Kevin Smith, like it's funny because like I got home from delivering newspapers one morning and Clerks was playing on HBO, and this is like 5 a.m, but I was like glued to the TV. I was like, what is this? This is like a black and white movie and these guys are like arguing in a convenience store. Like, what is this? But like that struck me, and like it was part of, I think, propelling me towards like I should try this whole filmmaking thing. So it is very funny that like Kevin Smith of all people wound up seeing it and commenting on it. But yeah, it's wild, man. Just wild.
See, I did not know that about Kevin Smith, that he had commented on it and been exposed to this. So good for him. Good for him. I like him better now, or even more, I should say. So we got another question. It's kind of it kind of goes back to those days. What made you get into 9/11?
I don't know. I guess being young and somewhat already politically minded and spending a lot of time on the internet and just, I don't know. I remember when 9/11 happened. I was like, even being as like a dumb 18-year-old, I was like, how is this possible? Like, aren't we supposed to be like the greatest military in the world, and we spend all this money on our defense budget, and yet 4 planes managed to do this? And so on that note, it was it was when the NORAD timeline started coming out, and I started seeing the articles about it and how the story started to change, and they're like, oh, well, this jet actually scrambled from here, and then these guys were actually sent in the wrong direction. And that to me was kind of like the big initial tipping point, because again, me as just like a young, dumb, curious teenager, I was just baffled as to how any of this could have happened. So it started with the NORAD timelines, and then I think footage of Building 7 started popping up, and then it was just kind of a snowball from there. So I'm an OG. You know, I've been concerned about this since it happened, basically. And I was concerned about the fact that my best friend was overseas. You know, his first day of basic training was 9/11/2001. He signed up in August 2001, and we're all just like, it's cool, man. There's not going to be a war anytime soon. So I got my best friend overseas fighting a war that he barely understands, and a war that I definitely don't understand. And then I start hearing about Iraq, and it's like, so wait, my best friend's in Afghanistan, and now he's going to be sent to Iraq, and like neither of us understand what's going on right now. So that was kind of a part of it too. It was just like I felt like I needed to do something, because like the big kind of like compromise slogan back then was like 9/11 truth ends all wars. So I was like, all right, well, if I can contribute to the 9/11 truth thing, then maybe I can help end these wars, and my best friend will come home safe. Which again, thankfully he did. But I mean, like it was a lot of things in 2002, 2003, 2004 where I was just like, I got to do something about this, you know?
Yeah, you know, that's something that the younger people may not even understand about our generation, is that when we were in high school, going into the military was, I mean, considered a safe thing, because it was like, okay, what's the worst conflict that we're going to get into? America will go in and win it and all of this. So if you didn't have money to go to college, you go to the military to learn a trade. I knew lots of people that did that, and they could come out okay, because the thinking is like all of the big wars have already been fought. And then suddenly, your introduction to adult world, you have September 11th, the whole world changes, and now this is a risky thing to join the military. So that's kind of a societal perspective that maybe the younger people don't have, knowing what we went through in our generation. All right, I'm trying to get all your loose change questions out of the way here. The next question comes in. I should start reading the names. This is from Mike. Who was your source of research when you made loose change?
Just whatever I could find on, it wasn't even History Commons at the time. It was the 9/11 timeline, and then the 9/11 timeline turned into History Commons, and it was, you know, the goal was to always cite my sources from things that could be found by other people, and like mainstream articles, you know, mainstream videos, etc. So the goal was to always try and cite, you know, the credible sources as much as possible. So internet, I hate to say it, but just internet and crawling around and clicking links and seeing where things go. And like I said, once the complete 9/11 timeline started shaping up, and then that branded into the History Commons, and then that really became like a comprehensive source of information.
Okay. Now I have somebody asking about a fact. I mean, I'm going to read every question that comes in, but it says, what made the hole in the side of the building where Edna Cintron can be seen? This is the woman waving out of the side of the building.
I know the name, but I'm pretty sure that was whatever struck the North Tower. I can't answer that like
Right.
outside of that.
It was an airplane. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the best we can do on that. Now, I don't want our audience to have it in your minds that you're just the 9/11 guy, because you've made other films, as I've said. One of them focuses on police brutality. It's called Black and Blue. And you made this before the larger focus on it that happened in the last few years after George Floyd was killed. So talk about that film. Why did you choose to zero in on that subject?
Well, it's funny because Black and Blue, I started making that in February of 2014. I was living in LA. I had been following the Kelly Thomas trial. I was driving to an editing job back and forth from home every day, so I was constantly hearing the updates. And like many people in LA, I was riveted by that trial, and I was like, there's no way these cops are going to get off, right? Like, they straight up murdered this homeless guy. So they got off, and then there was a first protest rally in January 2014, shortly after that. And then there was a second, I want to say February 8th, 2014. And Corey had just moved out to California too. So like we were kind of like crashing together in Long Beach. I was like, hey man, there's this rally going on up in LA. And like, I don't know, it's something I've been following for a while. You want to go check it out? And he's like, yeah. So like we both went up and took pictures. I shot footage, and then the night was winding down, and like somebody saw me with a camera, and he was like, hey, have you heard about this shooting? I was an eyewitness to it. And then the parents of the victim of that shooting were coming down the next weekend for a vigil, and so it just kind of like snowballed. So like one day I was just going to cover a rally just to see what happened, and then like a month later I was in like Fall River, Massachusetts, and Cape Cod, interviewing like George Thompson and DJ Alzi, and like just like following the story, because I mean at the time, like you said, it wasn't the huge talking point that it became. So from February to August 2014, I'm making my police brutality film about the things that I think are important and the things that need to be in there. And then Ferguson happens in August of 2014, and then suddenly I'm like, oh, like this is suddenly like a real thing. And like thankfully, like prior to Ferguson happened, someone had already hooked me up with an ex-cop in LA named Alex Salazar, so I was already kind of coordinating with him and working on his interview. And then he went to Ferguson, and it just kind of like snowballed and dogpiled and like turned into this thing that took 3 years of my life. But I'm still insanely proud of it, because again, it was something that I was very passionate about, something that I felt that I could, make something about, and just something that I cared about. And definitely a lot of things I would do differently if I went back to do it again. But, I made the movie, and it's out, and the people that are in it are very grateful for it, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, that is the important thing about being a documentary filmmaker. It's to help people, and it's probably the closest thing to superheroes that we have in our real world, those people with the camera pointing them at the stories that matter. Now, we just had a bunch of questions come in a flood here, so I'm just reading them as they came in here. Was Osama bin Laden a patsy? Who do you think, based upon everything you know in regard to 9/11, is the guilty party or parties who planned 9/11? Lay it out.
Not answering that. Not answering that, because that is speculation, and that is something that I do not do. Sorry.
All right.
I don't know. Don't ask me. I have no idea.
That is a good answer. No, I mean, I won't comment on anything if I don't know. All you can do is look at the facts, and that's why I focus on the science, because you can watch the videos. It was the most documented event in the 21st century. You can watch the videos.
I'm sorry, whoever asked that question, if that was a cop out. But again, it's like I don't speculate anymore. I don't do those things anymore.
Here's the next one. Have any of your films been censored from YouTube or other sharing sites?
Not really. There was one time where I had a private upload of the Loose Change 2nd Edition HD remaster just because I had it up and I was creating subtitles for it. So it was unlisted. Nobody was watching it. Nobody knew how to find it. Nobody knew how to find it. And like I was the only one that even gave it any views. But like one day out of the blue, I got an email like, "Oh, this video has been removed from your channel for violating community guidelines." And I'm just like, it's a unlisted upload that literally nobody can find or watch, and it's for my own purposes, and like I don't know. So but that's it. And that was, I mean, what was that? That was like a couple of years ago. Well, no, the HD remaster was like 17, 18. I can't even remember. But No, that's the only time. I mean, everything I've made since has has not necessitated being nuked off the internet. So thankfully, my silly narrative film about an asteroid and my police brutality documentary, they're all safe. So.
Yeah, there was a period where they were going crazy doing this. They did this with 3 old 9/11 free falls on the old channel. I hadn't even logged in on a time in it. But one of them they were claiming was hate speech. It was 2 9/11 family members, Bob McIlvaine and another person, and there was nothing hateful at all. There was 2 people saying they don't want to get revenge or go to war or anything like that. It was total garbage. We got it restored, but they tried to keep that down. Our next question says, where is it? Do you think the planes that flew into the buildings were military planes? They were both going faster than 500 miles an hour at sea level when they hit the buildings. Do you want to comment on that?
I don't know. Do I? I mean, again, we're going back into speculation and just like all these things that I had to talk about ad nauseum back in 2006. I don't know. You know, if they were remote controlled, then they would be controlled by the military. There you go. I don't know. I haven't had to answer questions like this in a while, so I don't know. I'm giving the same answers I gave 16 years ago. I'm sorry, anyone asking these questions, but again, this is all old hat for me, unfortunately, and I wasn't there. I have no idea. So.
All right, now this is a good one, and I'm glad I'm not the only one answering it because I can't tell you, but it says, how many independent videos were made of the collapse of 7?
Independent or just in general?
What I would assume they mean is how many videos are there of 7 coming down? Like, I want to say there's like or news.
Yeah, I want to say there's only like 7 or 8. There's not that many. I don't think. Because there's the famous PBS shot that was in the Naudet Brothers documentary. There's the CBS wide shot. There's not a lot. There's like 6 to 8, I think. There's not that many.
Yeah, it's always strange when you find a new one because we're always used to the same ones of the same angles and stuff like that. But I found a couple, but it's always weird to see it from a different angle. But it looks like a controlled demolition each time. So I'm going to ask you just your other films because I want everybody to know and to go and watch your other films. Talk about, you've done 9/11, police brutality. So talk about some of the other topics that you've covered.
I made a wacky independent comedy called Asteroid about an asteroid hitting a guy's house. We're pretty happy with that one. So if you're looking for something lighthearted after this, or even now if you're over this, if you just type in Asteroid 2021 into YouTube, it should come right up. But no, it's a silly little, like Corey and I had just moved back to our hometown and we were just like, hey, we're here back in our hometown. Like, let's write a silly little script that we can shoot here for fun and for cheap. And so we wrote it, and then COVID happened, and then we thought we weren't going to shoot it, but then things worked out, and then we did shoot it. And, now Otsego Media is thriving, and, we made Asteroid, Bringing Back Dead, Ouija Witch. Those are our 3 features. The last 2 were for hire. We've got a 4th one for hire coming from LA later this year, starting in the middle of September. We have another one that we're supposed to be doing in December, hopefully, but, we took a gigantic risk and we threw a bunch of money into this silly little film that we weren't even sure was going to work or not. We just wanted to make a silly little movie because that's all we ever wanted to do. He shot it, I directed it, we wrote it together, and it's our little baby. And then a producer from LA saw Asteroid and they were like, you made that movie for how much in upstate New York? Okay, great, because we got some films we want to make that we don't want to spend $300,000 on. So yeah, no, it's, I mean, that, and again, that's mostly where I'm at now, is like the post Asteroid world. Silly little independent film that everyone had a lot of fun making, and everyone has a lot of fun watching. Apparently, it's had like over 1 million views on YouTube. Like, we've made back our budget somehow. The distributor keeps asking us for a sequel, so I'd say it did pretty well. And again, we're doing pretty good now. We're making movies and living our lives and not having to deal with the past nearly as much as we used to.
Maybe you can make upstate New York like the new Hollywood, because God, I know we're both from
working on it.
New York. But,
we're working on it.
Yeah, that would be excellent. And a lot of great.
Maybe not the new Hollywood, but like the new Atlanta, the new like the new Vancouver. I don't know. It's because it's like it depends on what you're looking for your film. But I mean, we're trying to show that upstate New York is an untapped resource for making films, and I think that we're doing that. So.
Yeah, well, it can use the business and the people coming down there. I know because a lot of when I left there, it was a lot of unemployment and stuff. So maybe you can build something from that. Here's one from our audience: is what other I'm having it's a little bit jarbled. Cover up topics would you consider covering in a new film? Would you ever consider making a film that tells the whole story and history of the 9/11 truth movement so it's documented for history? That sounds like two questions.
Well, my answer was 0 to the first part of the question, and then I guess to the second part of the question is that like we've been approached and have discussed several times with several parties the loose change story and the 9/11 truth movement story, and like there's been many attempts, like people have written scripts, people have pitched it, but it just never gets off the ground. And I mean, like, I'm personally okay with it. I mean, it would be nice to like set the record straight and like put it out there in a way where people can see like, no, this is what actually happened, like in case you had some kind of perspective on how this went down, here's how it actually did. And I mean, there's the 25th anniversary of 9/11. There's the 20th anniversary of Loose Change coming out, which would be April 2025. Oh my God. And November 2025. So there's still like sales and marketing opportunities. But you know, it's just like nobody really wants to touch it. Because I mean, again, now, like especially like 9/11 Truth is associated with all the other crazy stuff that's out there. So QAnon, Flat Earth, Sandy Hook, Alex Jones, you know, you take your pick. So it's a little hard to get someone to listen to or make that story on the merit of the story itself. But people have tried, people have approached us about it. We'll see. We'll see what happens with these upcoming anniversaries.
Yeah, you know, it's such a vast story. I mean, I know in 9/11 Freefall, we've interviewed so many people. It's sort of like a little mini history of the 9/11 truth movement if you want to sit through 10 years worth of programs. So there's source material there, but it would be tough to put all into like a 2-hour film. It'd have to be like Roots or something. You'd have to have it like be a week-long miniseries or something, some kind of something with seasons on Netflix, you know, if they were to do that. Okay, this is a good one. If you were to name the best 9/11 documentary that
I don't know if I'm frozen or you're frozen, but you froze up there for a second.
All right. It may
something about best 9/11 documentary.
Right.
I'm
best
biased.
9/11
I'm biased. You can't ask me that question.
Well, it says that's not yours. They put a caveat in there.
Press for truth, in their own words. I mean, you know, if you're trying to get to the heart of the truth movement and learn about the Jersey Girls and their fight, then yeah, press for truth, in their own words, which is kind of like the companion piece to it. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank our audience. I think we've gotten through most of the questions that have come in. So I'm just going to ask you, Dylan, our last question to you. Where do you go from here? If you had your druthers, if you had your dream and all the resources that you need to do what you want, what kind of subject matter can we look forward to from you in the future? What are some territories that you haven't explored yet that you want to?
I mean, if we're talking about just strictly filmmaking, and I'm sure people are just asking about like documentaries and political stuff, I don't know. Like I'm just kind of chilling right now. like I don't have any major film projects. I mean, Corey and I are working on a couple things. We have like 3 different scripts we're trying to work on, but like he's busy with not only the production company but also the store that he's opening above the production company. So we have a couple like narrative things that we want to work on and get done. Nobody that's watching this broadcast is going to care about this, but I just finished recording an album of music that I'm actually pretty stoked about, and I'm going to be releasing hopefully about a month from today if I can get all my mixing and mastering sorted out. So yeah, unfortunately I can't be like, oh, here's the next big thing I'm working on film-wise. I'm just kind of chilling. I mean, we're Otsego Media is booked for weddings throughout the entire season. We have a major contract with the Glimmerglass Opera. Like I said, we have a major film we're bringing out from LA in September, which is a contact of mine, actually, somebody that I've known for like 10 years now. So I'm just chilling. I hope that doesn't sound like defeatist or blasé, but it's just like I always felt like there was always like that pressure, like what's the next big thing? And that's kind of like what led to Black and Blue, where I was like, all right, well, I need to make something that's not just another 9/11 documentary, another political one. Like I need to show that I care about shit that matters. So I did that, and I did Magic Molecule about CBD, and like I've because that was kind of the whole thing for the longest time, is like I just want to direct a narrative feature film, like that's all I want to do, and then I finally did it with Asteroid, and for a long time I was like, I want to make an album, I want to make music, and now I've done that, so it's like I'm just kind of chilling. I just got back from covering a pretty awesome festival in Kentucky, and that was kind of like my one hurrah for the summer, and now I'm going to be working until November, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, sometimes when you're just chilling is when the best ideas come to you. Sometimes it's better to not have a plan. And,
no, I'm
see what comes up.
I'm chilling. I'm waiting to see what happens next.
Well, Dylan, thank you so much. I know that you've done a lot with this topic, and we had you make another 9/11 film. It is great, though, and it's going to be available, folks, on our Vimeo channel. If you're not signed up for our emails, I don't know why you're not, because that's how you keep track of what we're doing. For some reason, the mainstream media doesn't really want to report on us, so we have to do it ourselves, and that's got to get hooked into the email system to find it out. So keep an eye out for the bulletins. We're going to be releasing that. 30 Seconds of Silence. You've been joined by Dylan Avery. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let our guests go, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you for tuning in.